ask that you rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
O Lord God Almighty, guide, we pray you, all those to whom you have committed the government of this city, and grant to them at this time special gifts of wisdom and understanding, of counsel and strength, that upholding what is right and following what is true, they may obey your will and fulfill your divine purpose. Amen.
All right, Ms. McNear, you do roll call.
Mr. Anderson?
Present.
Mrs. Gantos?
Present.
Mr. Hawkins?
Present.
Mr. Jacobs?
Present.
Mr. Ramirez?
Present.
Mrs. Sullivan-Weiscup?
Present.
Mr. Vanover?
Present. All right, council, we have two sets of minutes before us this evening. The first is the September 21st, 2022 meeting. If there are not any additions or corrections, I'll accept the motion. Motion second. Any further discussion? All right, all those approving the September 21st, 2022 meeting minutes as published signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The minutes are approved with 7 affirmative votes. And then the next one is the October 5th, 2022 meeting. Again, if there are no additions or corrections, I'll entertain a motion. Motion second. Discussion? All right, all those approving the minutes as published signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The minutes are approved with 7 affirmative votes. All right, and at this time, we have a presentation from Andy. I didn't take my
Thank you, Mr. President.
preface.
I think. If you already do not have a copy of the presentation, it is coming down the row. And get the TV. There we go. All right, so I'm going to try to go through this quickly because it's pretty dry material. The presentation was lifted from one done by attorneys for another community entertainment district in another part of Ohio a few years ago. So no offense to Mr. Braun, but it's somewhat dry. There's no pictures. I don't like doing PowerPoints without pictures, but here we are. So the purpose of this is to get the information out in front of council and the public prior to bringing any legislation to you on this particular item, and hopefully pre-answer any possible question that anyone will have, although I'm sure that I will not be surprised if there's a few more questions that haven't been thought of through this presentation. So it's all about community entertainment districts. We're going to go through what it is, why form it, key provisions, application and approval process, what it is not, and conclusion and next steps. So very first item, what is it? It's spelled out in Ohio Revised Code 4301.8. It's a bounded area that includes or will include a combination of uses within close proximity to some or all of the following types of establishments within the district. So it's going to have potentially entertainment, retail, education, sporting, all those uses in close proximity to each other, as well as retail, sales establishments, restaurants, museums, hotels, et cetera, et cetera. It's basically purpose-made for a large mixed-use project that's going to have a variety of uses, a variety of restaurants and or bars and or venues that would want to serve some version of liquor or beer or wine, this gives special opportunities that we'll cover as to providing more liquor permits because we have limits. Okay, so still under the first section, as far as existing community entertainment districts go, and I'm going to start referring to them as CED, so I don't have to say that throughout the whole presentation. There's currently 108 of them in Ohio. In this immediate area around Springdale, we have 2 in Hamilton, 2 in Liberty Township, 2 in Westchester, 23 in the city of Cincinnati, and then 1 in Montgomery and Sharonville each. Why form one? It's all about Ohio's liquor permit quota system. So the system limits the number of liquor permits allowed within a jurisdiction based on population, and it impacts the different kinds of permits differently. The type of permit most often used by full-service restaurants that wish to serve beer, wine, and mixed drinks is known as a D5 permit, and this is the kind of permit that a permit within a CED is most like. You could see the box below I took straight out of the Ohio Division of Liquor Control's website, where they list all the permits available in every jurisdiction throughout the state of Ohio. I pulled this on October 17th, so it's very current data. And you'll notice that for C1 and C2 permits, permits available are -1. And the reason for that is because they are using a population number for Springdale of 10,910. And so you have the ratio column shows 1,000 as far as the population. So you get one permit for every 1,000 population. Once you cross over a population, a number, so once you 11,000, 11,001, that gets you another permit. So we were, according to the 2020 census, just over 11,000, and then the census, U.S. Census, did an update in 2021 that had us at this 10,910 number. So we went from being able to get 12 permits, because we were over 11,000, to now only being able to get 11 permits. So we're grandfathered in with one extra permit right now. So if one of these permits went away today, our new quota would be 11. Obviously, with all the new construction that we have going on with multifamily here, within a few years that is going to change, and we're going to be back at 12 and eventually at 13 and 14, we hope. But for right now, for the next year or two, this is the situation. So for D5 permits, you see we have one available at the very bottom of that table. Any questions on this particular page? Okay.
Annie, just a quick question on, back up one slot to the existing CEDs. Does that include the one down in, on Harrison Avenue that they've created?
What jurisdiction?
It's probably Green Township, maybe.
I pulled
Or,
a selected number that are right around us. I know there's more with 108 in the whole state. I know that there's others in Mason, and Loveland's got one, according to our law director. So yeah, I don't try to be exhaustive with the whole Cincinnati area.
Sure.
I just try to highlight some of the ones that are closest to us. And I thought the Cincinnati number was interesting with 23, so that's why I stuck that one in.
Yeah.
All right. All right, so why Form 1? Again, it's still about the liquor permit quota system. So as the supply becomes more constrained, the cost and availability of permits can go up dramatically. So that's where we see this whole TREX system come into play, that when Ms. McNear talks about some of these permit applications that come into us occasionally to the city that we have to sign off on, and sometimes you hear it's a TREX application. They're literally buying an application from some other part of the state to be able to bring it in here under that provision to kind of get around our quotas a little bit. But those are very expensive. You're paying up to $30,000 easily for those kinds of applications. The establishment of a CED creates a new geographically limited allocation of permits that are in most ways comparable to that D5 permit. The mixes of uses, as is planned with Artisan Village, is consistent with the intent of the Ohio Revised Code. Liquor permits, already talked about how it allows for additional pool of liquor permits to be issued within the defined area. By the way, the one thing I don't think I spelled out in this presentation is the application that the mayor received obviously includes the entire 75 acres of Artisan Village. So I did not include a map because it's the entire site. And you'll find that as you're reviewing the actual application itself if you wish to do so. A CED must have a minimum of 20 acres. We obviously exceed that. You get one permit for every 5 acres, up to a max of 15 liquor permit allocation, but you don't get any more after that 75-acre mark. So we're at the right size. Each CED needs to have a planned minimum development investment threshold of $50 million. It can include public or private. Obviously, we meet that requirement as well with Artisan Village. Next slide. The CED-enabled permits may be transferred only within the CED boundaries, so it's very important. They're constrained to that geographic area. If a restaurant that has one within Artisan Village at some point decides they're going to go out of business and they want to try to sell their permit, they can't. It cannot get transferred outside of the boundaries of Artisan Village. Liquor permits, as I said, they're identified as D5J permits, which is just a variation to designate them as not quite a normal D5. And the current cost of getting those through the Ohio Division of Liquor Control is $2,300 versus the market price that I talked about that could be up to $30,000. Same privileges and restrictions for a D5J permit holder as a D5 permit holder. Therefore, restaurants that serve food and allow spirituous liquor for on-premises consumption only, beer, wine, mixed beverages for on-premises or off-premises consumption in the original sealed containers until 2:30 a.m. Outback, Mi Cozumel, Chipotle, BJ's, they will all have the option to sell their higher-priced, more mobile D5 permits and replace them with the lower-cost D5J permits. So that's a nice side benefit for those folks that stick through this construction process in this first phase and are still going to be here to serve customers. The new allocation of D5J does not impact the city's normal quota of D5. The city controls the creation of the CED district itself, but same Ohio Division of Liquor Control control of the issuance of liquor permits within the CED. So it's normal process, they still have to apply, do a state application, none of that changes. So the application and approval process. Any owner of the property in a city may file the application to create a CED. And it includes a whole bunch of information. I'm not going to go through that whole paragraph that's on the slide, but the name and address, a detailed map of the proposed CED, et cetera, et cetera. The very last item, number 7 in that paragraph, the ORC also allows for the local jurisdiction to charge a handling and processing fee. We have not established any such fee. We did not ask them to submit a fee for this. Next page. So the application is submitted to the mayor, who makes a recommendation to City Council within 30 days of receipt of that application. City Council, within 30 days of receipt from the mayor, must notify the public of the application, advertising for 2 weeks in a newspaper of general circulation. Public hearing is not required. The application must be available, though, for public inspection during that time, which is easy to do with websites and PDFs now. Within 75 days after the date the mayor has submitted the application to council, City Council must take action to either approve or disapprove the application by ordinance or resolution. What a CED is not. It has no effect other than to create the new pool of restaurant liquor permits within that CED area. It does not in any way limit the city's normal land use, the zoning, other regulatory functions or oversights. It does not exempt those establishments from any of the other state requirements and operational controls that apply to liquor serving establishments. Conclusion, next steps. So the formation of the CED is consistent with the plans that the city's already approved overall and the vision the city has for creating a vibrant mixed-use environment at Artisan Village. It does not allow open containers of beer and liquor within the CED. That will be addressed separately through the DORA application when that is brought before council. But this is a completely separate issue. It does not impact the city's normal zoning and regulatory land use controls. It simply improves the availability and cost of liquor permits. Again, it establishes within the CEDs the pre-existing conventional liquor permits would be able to sell, those holders would be able to sell those conventional permits for the new D5J, and it'll actually be a financial benefit to those holders of existing D5 permits. And the state of Ohio processes the D5J permits on a first come, first served basis. So Mayor Webster submitted the CED application to City Council on October 14th, which began the 75-day period. in which the city council must, as I mentioned previously, advertise for 2 consecutive weeks in a newspaper of general circulation of the submitted application, and then by resolution or ordinance, and you see we have that highlighted in red on the screen, take action to approve or disapprove the application. We discussed this with our law director, and the statute really allows for either type of legislation. Resolution, obviously, it can be done in one meeting without any additional, without the 2 readings or the emergency clause. And I think the intent was to leave it up to council for discussion as to how you wanted to proceed with that, the format of the legislation. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, any discussion on.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. One question on the distribution of the liquor permits. I know you said the Department of Liquor controls the issuing, and it's first come, first serve. Is there anything that we can or need to do as an approving body to help ensure that those licenses go to the best place that helps the developer kind of fill out the vision for the area? Or are they doing that on the back end through their leasing arrangements? When you say first come, first serve, I'd hate to, people rush out there before they have leasing and then jam up and maybe hamstrung the developer. If there's something we can do to make it easier.
Well, I don't know the controls necessarily on somebody coming in and applying for a permit if they don't have a signed lease within the site.
Okay.
I would believe that they're not able to do that, but that's probably something we need to look a little more into to make sure nobody does that. It would be kind of foolish to do that, because if they don't have a signed lease and they don't get a signed lease, then they have this permit that they can't use. So yeah.
But there are people that might do that, license squatting. I just want to make sure that's not an issue for the development. And maybe you're right, maybe it requires a lease, and if that's the answer, then that's great.
Well, in any case, I would believe it's going to be the same process as when we get other permits here that Ms. McNear brings up at council meetings, asking if there's any objection. That will obviously provide us the opportunity to double check with the developer and say, is this somebody that you want to get a permit, a liquor permit? Do you have a signed lease, or et cetera? So I believe the city can at least request a hearing, if not have to sign off on these types of permits. We can at least request a public hearing when somebody's applied.
Thank you.
Mr. Braun?
Yeah, the only thing I would add, when you create the community entertainment district, you draw the boundaries. And in this particular instance, it's my understanding that the boundaries are going to be drawn such that they only include this development.
Yes.
So, and I know the developers here, if they're going to only issue a lease or allow someone to locate there, because one of the requirements is you have to either own or have an interest in a property within the district. So that would solve your problem. The slide up there said within the city. The requester has to be within the district, not just within the city, as does the liquor holder, or the permit holder. The other thing I would add is, and Andy already basically addressed it, but I think it's important to know that if a alcohol wrongdoer, if you will, or someone we've had perpetual problems with, and the police department reports that to us, requests, just as any other applicant will do. They'll come through here, you'll hear Ms. McNear report, we've received this application, and you'll have a thumbs up, thumbs down veto, if you will. So I think the best way to look at it as the developer is the first line of defense in who we're going to allow to apply, and then we get some say, with the Bureau of Liquor Control.
So say more. You answered all the questions.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Kucha. Yes, Mr. Anderson.
Did we want to give any guidance on resolution versus ordinance? For me, I think a resolution's fine, but I didn't know what other people thought. I thought that was a question to us also.
Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. President. And I was going to just ask Mr. Braun, beyond the notice part of it and the ability to enact it, is there any benefit to one or the other, if versus a resolution versus an ordinance with an emergency clause? Is there?
I don't think I would enact it with an emergency clause, only because I don't think there's a need, because we have the application. We know the time frame of the 75 days. You could, obviously. I think it's probably, I told Andy that, Mr. Gupta, that I did this in Loveland most recently, and we did it by resolution. The only reason that you may want to do it by ordinance is it allows for 2 readings, but I will also remind you, you don't have to pass a resolution in 1 reading. You can do 2 readings if you want. If you want to have a public hearing, since you've never done a community entertainment district, just because it's not required doesn't mean you can't have one. You really do control the rules on this, but the one thing I would say, I like the idea of doing a resolution so that if there's any issues with the legislation, we would have a little extra time to address those. I'll also tell you that once we pass it, it goes up to the state. They do review everything, make sure that there's no violations, or, you know, you have to identify all the parcels that are included, things like that. They'll review the application just as we will. And so I don't have a preference. The last 2 that I've done, I did by resolution, but we wanted to leave it up to you.
And if there's, time frame wise, is it important for us to act next November meeting or second November meeting?
I think we're well within the time of it. You said October 14, you've got 75 days, so it's totally up to you.
If it's October 14th, we have a meeting on the 2nd, and then it'd be the 16th. So we'd have to act on it next time, right?
No, it's what, 75 days after
2 months and
2 months?
You have 2 months.
Oh, oh,
You do have plenty of time.
yes,
By the end, almost the end of the year, yeah.
Yeah.
okay. There's a whole month in between there that I just completely ignored.
skip November.
Okay.
I have
Well,
no
you know
problem
what,
with
it's
the
not my fault.
resolution.
When it's 20 degrees outside, I assume it's at least November, so it's not really my fault.
Yeah, I personally have no issue with the resolution or taking action in November.
Anybody else weigh in?
Then,
Ordinance, resolution? Resolution? Resolution?
then I'll make sure the legislation we prepare is a resolution, and I'll bring that before council.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Wallace? Does he?
Do you mind if I approach?
Please.
Mr. President, honorable council members, Mr. City Administrator, it's a pleasure to be back here. David Wallace, 8334 Ginger Oak Street, Houston, Texas, 77055. It's a pleasure to be back here once again. Many of you were at the State of the City a couple of weeks ago, and it was a pleasure to be able to talk with everyone there and update everyone what was going on with the Artisan Village. Some of you were not there, and so I had requested that I could come tonight just to bring some of you up to speed on where things are headed. There's a lot of exciting things that are taking place. Obviously, the entertainment district is part of that. We are going to be back before you relative to ADORA, relative to a new community authority, as well as we continue to move forward. One of the things that the mayor and the city administrator were talking about recently was everyone keeps asking, when is construction going to start? So if you've driven by Artisan Village since Monday, you notice that a new construction fence is being erected right now. So it's well over a mile long of a construction fence. So it's a big area, but nevertheless, within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we should have that completed. And then obviously we're going to be working with the city relative to sign ordinances and what we can put on there relative to a wrap and coming soon information as well. I think all of you know that this is a partnership between Park Harbor Capital, Market Space Capital. The managing director of Market Space is with us this evening, Sohail Hassan, as is Mitch Seema, who is sitting next to him. Mitch is the project manager on this particular project. So for the next 10 plus years, he is going to be a proud resident of the city of Springdale. And you do know that, don't you, Mitch? Okay, fantastic. So there's obviously a lot of exciting things that are taking place as we continue to move forward. One of the things that we've continued to harp about is sustainability. And I know you've heard me say that we've got 2.6 million square feet of concrete and steel, and north of 2.4 million square feet is what we're preserving as we continue to move forward. But we've continued to take that sustainability approach even as we're moving forward with certain demolition issues. And what I mean by that is there is an organization called Everything But the House. And in this case, it's Everything But the Mall, meaning that they come out and they analyze everything that can be auctioned off. And you know, whether it's an air handler, whether it is racks that may have been there from the retailers that were there before. So all of that is moving forward to be able to, again, not put that stuff in landfills, but to be able to reuse it in the great state of Ohio. We also have been working with various nonprofit organizations dealing with at-risk children, where we literally said, have at it. Go into these stores, go back, look and see what is still in the back, whether it's a pair of shoes, whether it's jewelry, whatever the case may be. And I will tell you that these organizations have really benefited by finding a lot of really good things that they can use for their organizations. And those are things that we obviously want to make sure that we continue to focus on as we move forward. Sitting here today, we're well over 1 million square feet of either leases, MOUs, or letters of intent that we have signed. Some very good progress that we have continued to make. We obviously haven't had a lot of announcements as to what we are going to be bringing in. I think some of us have had one-on-one conversations. I think you know some of the prospects that we have. We also have spent a lot of time. I know that there was a briefing recently to this body relative to a bond anticipation note and then the TIF term sheet. I'm pleased to say that that was signed this last week with the Cincinnati Port Authority, and all of the deposits that we needed to pay, about $50,000 we paid already, and so we're looking forward to moving forward on that particular aspect of this as well. So a lot of exciting things that are taking place. I know I mentioned this to the mayor and the city administrator when they were talking about, well, we have a lot of citizens that are asking the question about where are things. I thought for sure by now we would see a 10-story building. As you know, it doesn't happen that fast. And one of the things that I continue to say, and I said this at the State of the City as well, is that this group, every single one of you, bent over backwards to help us to get to the point, because we had certain deadlines of due diligence when earnest money went hard, but working with Princeton School District, working with us on the major PUD modification, everybody, staff, council, bent over backwards to really help us move forward quickly. And literally in less than 60 days from the date that I first came to Cincinnati and Springdale to when we actually had the major PUD modification approved, that's less than 60 days. That is fast. That is unheard of. And so now, unfortunately, we're having to bring the architects, engineers, sub-consultants, all of those folks at the same rate. And so it may look like we've slowed down, but I will tell you we have not. Things are continuing to move forward very quickly. So as you talk to the citizens, if people ask the question, in fact, I think you said that your mother was over at the community center talking to some folks, and she said to you, she said, my gosh, this is terrible. They said the developers have gone back to Texas. And your response was, yeah, they go back every week. And in fact, I'm having lunch with them today. They're back here. So in any event, we are proud, we're excited, obviously, about everything that we're working on here. And as I always say, you know, the best way to predict the future, obviously, is to make it yourself. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So with that, I'd love to open it up for any questions. We want to be as transparent as we can with the city.
You stunned us all again.
Well, this is a shame because I thought I wasn't going to be able to talk until at the end. Mitch has never been to a city council meeting. And I said, well, I think they've only got 4 action items tonight. And so,
Yeah.
but now I think we probably can go watch the Houston Astros beat the New York Yankees.
There you go.
So, which is something we're proud of. So, but with that, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to bring you up to speed.
Thank you, and it's good to see you again.
Likewise. Thank you so much, guys.
Take care.
Thank you.
All right. With all the glitz and glamour, we'll move into committee and official reports. First off, we have Civil Service Commission, and that's Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, Council. I'll keep my report somewhat brief here. Civil Service Commission did meet on October the 6th, and all members were present. And with all of the discussion that took place at that particular meeting, I want to summarize it by saying that I believe there have been 5 different departments impacted by vacancies and openings that have occurred since September the 1st. And those departments included the fire department, the police department, the building department, the tax department, and Springdale Parks and Recreation Department. And I make that statement only to make you aware of the amount of work that has occurred within the administration, particularly with Brian and Stephanie and Mr. Jones as well, in order to keep things moving forward, to fill those vacancies and to try and stay on top of things. And as a result, I'd say we are 85 to 90% there with having filled the vacancies. So the majority of these vacancies have, as I said, now been filled. There are still some who are still in process, and that's due to different dilemmas. We had one particular case where an individual had been hired, and just before he was due to start, he changed his mind and backed out. And so those things are not preventable, and as a result, we continue to be flexible and try to move forward to continue with the process. Additionally, I wanted to make you aware that with our discussion, we said that there will be a position filled based on requisite skills and experience. And I make that statement because in our discussions, there's a list of positions that were exempted from testing. And we went through the list of positions. Administration presented that information to us along with a proposed list of additions. And so having reviewed all of that, we identified those positions that are newly proposed, and a proposal was made by Mrs. Darby to add those additions to the October list of the current exempted position listings, reserving the right again to test in the event we thought it would be appropriate. So the point being there that there's a position in public works maintenance, and rather than test for the position, that position will fall within the guidelines for the waiver, if you will, which puts it on the designated list of those positions to be waived, therefore moving things forward rather quickly as opposed to having to test and go through the other process. So again, that position, as some of the others, will be filled, as I said, based on requisite skills and experiences. So again, hats off to administration to keep things moving forward, because it's been a very, very busy time. Any questions?
Don't see any.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's always good to see you.
Good to be here. Bad me all.
It's good to be seen, right? Rules and laws, Ms. Gantes.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
Finance Committee, Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
Planning Commission, Ms. Weisskopf.
Thank you, Mr. President. Planning Commission met on October 11th, and we had 6 members present. Mr. Golster was feeling ill. We only had one item. We had a major modification to a PUD, final development plan for U-Haul at 600 Kemper Commons Circle. There was a lot of discussion, a lot of different things that were brought up with this, and at the end of everything, it was voted 5-1 in favor, and so they will be moving in as soon as they needed to still close on it. I think they were closing this week, and then they were going to be waiting for the tenant to move out, and as soon as that tenant moves out, they planned on going forward and starting the construction of their other building as soon as they could, and then the main building that used to be Walmart, that is going to be, as soon as that tenant is out, they're going to start making it into U-Haul. And that was all I have, unless you have anything.
I just might add that the major discussion was over signage,
Yes.
and you'll notice it when you see the buildings. The whole face of the building will look like it has garage doors, but they're not functional garage doors. They're for they're for looks only, to try to advertise that they do storage. And so the discussion was whether that was signage or not signage, and that was one of the reasons for the one dissension. We were trying to control what, if they could use those garage doors for other advertising purposes. And in the end, like you said, it passed 5-1.
And
Thank you.
And it is defined in our code that anything that is on the walls like that is considered advertisement because it is advertising that it was storage. They are considering that signage and advertising signage. And they had made a good faith promise that they weren't going to change those, because it's orange garages looking things that are painted on there. And we just basically wanted to make sure that they weren't going to change those up every couple of months and put like red, white, and blue, or like write U-Haul sale or anything on it. That they're just going to keep them as ornamental looking garage doors. And that's what they agreed that they were going to do. So, but according to our zoning, technically there's nothing we could do to keep them from, like if they wanted to change those, they could if they wanted to. But they did say that in good faith they would not, that it was, that they were sticking to what we said, and we even put that in our considerations on our motion. So,
If they wanted to change, they would still have to come back to us.
yes, that they would have to
So
come back to us.
we will know if they want to put some graphics on it or put their logos on it, whatever they want to do, we would still have some say-so.
And they did modify the signage that they had on the main building. They originally had more signage on the old Walmart, and they took some of that away, and they were saying, it's kind of an exchange for having this, and after a whole lot of discussion, we were like, you had a lot of signage in the first place, and we ended up, like I said, it was a 5-1 vote in favor of after all the discussion. The hard part about the way that it is that a lot of us don't see those garages as signage. I see it as ornamental, but in all facts and actuality, that is signage, and so that is something to keep in mind as we go forward with new places coming in. Is what is the outside going to look like? Is that going to be signage? Is this the new thing? Is painting on the outside instead of doing conventional signage? So that was something that we will be watching and looking for in the future, but that was an exception. That was a consideration. It wasn't the norm. Thank you.
All right, Board of Zoning Appeals, Ms. Gantes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Board of Zoning Appeals met on Tuesday, September 27th. We only had one item of business. A representative for Castanelli Family LLC came to talk on, to speak on behalf of Skyline Chili Restaurant located at 85 East Kemper Road. They were requesting 2 variances. The first one was to zoning code 153.459C4, allowing a pole sign on the property with direct frontage on an interstate highway. So you guys probably know that we've been trying to eliminate pole signs. It was tough because the presentation they made was beautiful. This pole sign they were proposing was beautiful. So it was hard, but we did decline that. We didn't have any board members vote in favor of allowing that new pole sign. The second item was for zoning code section 153.459C2, allowing wall signs on the building elevations with front on a public way. Now, we did allow this, and it was 7-1 vote, because that property is very uniquely situated over there. You can see the sides of that building from everywhere, from those parking lots behind and whatever. And naturally, the business wanted that exposure. So we did vote in favor of that. Jeff, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's great. Although you're right, I thought in terms of pole signs, it was probably the nicest pole sign, if you can say that I've seen. I mean, it looked nice, but it's just not what we've been talking about doing. It is worth noting that they had some questions about that, and we told them that that's really a matter for council if we want to adjust the zoning code to account for businesses in that area. They did show us some interesting slides of what a drive-by looks like in that area with growth and vegetation, how that can affect the ground signs. Right now, we allow 8-foot high ground signs. And when you put that together with some of the foliage, some of the ground, like the vegetation, it can be tough to see some of those signs. So it's something to think about as you're driving around. Think about, do we want to change that ground sign requirement to allow in some of these areas taller signs, especially where there's a lot more commercial? Maybe not full pole signs, but if you look like the monument signs that people are starting to do now, especially like what we've allowed for Sweeney and some of these bigger brands that require them, these monument signs aren't really pole signs and they're not really ground signs. They're just this different placard. So I only mention it to think about it as you're driving through to see if we're doing the best we can for the businesses, if they're getting enough visibility with this ground signs they're allowed. I thought it was an interesting presentation they showed, but it was a pole sign with a spinning top. It looked nice, but we've said that that's not something we want unless there's a reason. So I think it's fair to say, think about it. If the ground signage isn't enough, we can talk about that. So I just want to put that out there too. Told them we could talk about it at council if we needed to. Thank you.
All right, Board of Health, Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Board of Health met on October 13th. As everybody knows that was there, the annual health fair was a great success, and they're going to continue to offer booster shots for COVID and flu shots for the rest of the month, and then up until certainly the 3rd of November on Thursdays, as they often do, from 9 to 1. During the meeting, it was discussed that that booster is recommended by our local board and by national experts, and we're talking mostly about the latest variant, the bivalent COVID booster is still recommended. There was a mobile clinic at Heritage Hill Elementary where students were given vaccines that they had almost run out of time for. So it's just a great service that Nurse Ellis provides to the local community. That's one example. We mentioned Skyline. They have opened a completely renovated store, and it's open and looking great. The Hotel Motel Committee has been meeting, and one of the priorities for the last several months has been to get a little more aggressive with some of our hotels. We have some great vendors in the city, and then we have some hotels that are just not meeting the standard that we have come to expect. There have been specific hotels that have been targeted with abatement orders. That process is in the works with some deadlines coming up. And as I said, we have some hotel vendors that are doing a great job, and some that we're going to get more aggressive with. There was even a discussion of if our inspections have to come out repeatedly, maybe even adding a fine structure for those repeated visits when the orders are not met. So it's an aggressive approach, but at some point these places might be labeled a chronic nuisance, and that's what the city has to do. Just finally, there was a second reading of fee schedule amendments that happen every year. They'll get their third reading at the next meeting, and they'll likely be approved. Unless there's any questions, that concludes my report. I'll just pass this around the dais. This is the health magazine that the Board of Health put out. It's an online document, and it's organized in just such a great way, and it's very simple, and it attacks just about any common health concern that residents may have. It's a great document. It's available online as well, but I'll pass this around so the members can see it. And like I said, unless there's any questions, that concludes my report.
Don't see any lights. Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Capital improvements, Ms. Gantes.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
All right. OKI, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. OKI board did meet on October 13th. One item I wanted to share was around grants that were approved in that meeting for surface transportation block grants and also transportation alternative grants, STBG and TA grants, as the cool kids call it. It was a total of $69 million, which is the most that they've ever approved in a single year, which is a lot of money. The reason for the increase is partly due to the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill from the federal government, which helped a lot. Why it's relevant is you can see these projects actually starting. One thing that's interesting is more than half of that money that was approved has gone towards safety, bike, pedestrian, and mass transit initiatives in our local communities. So you're talking about over $18 million for bike pedestrian projects. These are things like the connector we talked about last time, mass transit projects, upgrading bikes, rental bikes, community things, buses, doing that. Metro Dash we talked about as another $17 million was given for next year. All of these projects have about a 20 to 50% local match, so it's a good deal, and it gets the money out there. So $69 million was approved, and the majority was for alternative transportation. It's also interesting, since we're moving forward with our bike, pedestrian, multi-use path discussions, it's more and more it's not we're not ahead, right? We need to do that just to stay current with what's happening in the communities around us. So there's a lot of money out there for it, and people are starting to spend it. So hopefully we can get that approved soon and start getting some of these done here locally as well. Unless there's any questions, I have a presentation that has all the projects. There's about 30 of them that were approved if you're interested in them or what's happening, but otherwise, unless there's questions, that's it.
No lights. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mayor's report. Mr. Jones, did you have anything bad in, or?
He gave me a couple things, meaning the mayor, Mr. President, and thank you. I'll report that when I'm doing my report tonight.
All right. Clerk, Council, Finance Director, Ms. McNear.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the general fund update through August 31st, 2022 for receipts based on a net receipt budget of $21.218 million. We have received $17.506 million, which is 83% of the budget. And that budget receipt is made up of 5 general fund resources, which are earnings tax, real estate taxes, paramedic services, local government funds, and mayor's court, for a subtotal of $16.294 million, which is 93% of the receipts. For expenditures through August 31st, based on a net expenditure budget of $21.349 million, we have spent $13.869 million, which is 63% of the budget. And our ending general fund report, the balance is $8.953 million through August 31st. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Jones, the administrator's report.
Thank you, President Vanover. The mayor specifically asked that I remind folks about trick or treat. It's Monday, October 31st from 6 to 8 p.m. So he also asked that I remind folks to drive slowly through the neighborhoods, much slower than normal. There's always kids crossing, and he said, you know, with it getting dark so quickly now and so forth, that we really need to be careful out there. So in addition to that, Mr. President, I'd like to add that the business that was operating at Greencastle, we were getting some complaints coming through not just council, but Mr. President and the mayor. We were hearing about it. I would like to really thank our police department and our building department for their efforts, and they were very, very diligent. The folks have been cited, and they'll be going to court later in the month, I believe the 26th of this month. So we do appreciate that. From Director Wilson at Parks and Rec, registration for youth basketball, grades 2nd through 6th, ends this Friday. So if you got a little one, get them signed up. Halloween event coming up, Monster Mania, Saturday, October 22nd at the Community Center. It's a free event to our community. There'll be games, activities, costumes, contest for kids that are 4th grade and under, and the 501st Legion will be in attendance. Another thing the mayor asked that I remind folks of as well was Veterans Day Memorial Ceremony will take place on Friday, November 11th at 1 p.m. at the memorial. I know that's during working hours, but many folks, we still get from time to time folks that up here that are elected officials are able to make it, and we're always grateful to have that. And it's a great event, and it's a pretty short event if you haven't attended in the past. Along with what was being presented on behalf of civil service, we do have a full-time second shift custodian we're looking for, a full-time building inspector supervisor, full-time public works maintenance worker, and then part-time positions at various different departments. We're looking for maintenance worker, customer service representative, fitness instructor, and facilities maintenance worker. So if you know folks that are interested in work, it's a competitive business out there right now, trying to, as Mr. Coleman pointed out, accurately so, we have folks that will accept a job and then a day or two or the day of, they pull out. Or we have folks that are scheduled for interviews, and I'm talking all the positions, all departments, and they simply do not show and they don't contact you. So it's really a different than what we've seen over the years, at least in my short 38-year career. It's much different than what we witnessed, but nonetheless, you were very kind about the sending out kudos and compliments to administration, but we very much appreciate what you and as a leader of the civil service and what you're doing too. So thank you for that. And that ends my report.
Okay. Mr. Yule, you have anything to add? All right. Law Director's report, Mr. Braun.
No reports this evening, Mr. President.
Okay. And Engineers report, Mr. Riggs.
All right, we'll start with the Public Works Salt Dome Roof Replacement Project. That project is substantially complete, so it'll fall off our report next month. Crescentville Road Improvements Project. The contractor is complete with all the water main work. All the services have been tied over. Started working on the storm sewer trunk line installation along the north side, and that's expected to be completed before the winter shutdown. The Northland Boulevard reconstruction project. We had an updated findings report that was shared with Public Works on September 9th. We had a follow-up meeting to that report on October 4th with them, and we submitted a fee proposal for the final design of the shared use path. That was on October 14th, and it's currently under review. The East Kemper Road CSX Railroad Bridge Repair Project, we'll talk more about this one later this evening, but the construction contract was advertised on September 1st with the September 22nd bid opening. There was a single bid submitted by Pruce Construction for $1,199,678.50. The engineer's estimate for this project was $864,277, so a little ways off. The bid was $335,401.50 over, or 31.81% over the engineer's estimate. The city's charter does allow contract award provided for anything over 15%, provided that you have a public hearing. So that'll be before you this evening. State Route 4 Urban Paving Project. The final plans were submitted to the City of Fairfield on October 5th, and the bid opening scheduled to take place on Monday, January 30th. State Route 747 Urban Paving Project. Revised final plans and tracings were submitted to, and the construction estimate was submitted to ODOT on September 21st. And that's all I had.
Okay. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not sure if it's Mr. Riggs or Mr. Jones that deserves the credit, but I did get feedback that they, related to the Crescentville Road project, the community over there has seen an increase in street sweeping and the sweeper running over more often. We've had a lot of issues with nails over there. My mom lives over there and she's very concerned about it, but they've noticed the extra street sweepers. So if that's either Mr. Riggs or Mr. Jones, thank you for that, and keep running those extra routes because it seems to be helping.
Mr. Jones.
Thank you, and boy, I would like to take credit for that. I have had our Sir President of Council and our Mayor make it very clear to us that things need to be done. In talking with who's present this evening, with Jeff Agricola, our Director of Public Works, he said we will get up there and we will do it every chance we get and see if that doesn't help us out. So I appreciate you bringing that up, and certainly want to thank Public Works for their contributions.
Yeah, it's noticed, so thank you.
Yeah. Definitely, and also, Mr. Riggs, that contractor doing the Crescentville work has done a yeoman's job of controlling traffic flow, because, well, anybody that's goes through there, the volume is just unbelievable, and I haven't seen too many tempers flare, and but they do a good, and plus they have to integrate International Boulevard from Westchester into that flow too, so give them a tip of the hat for that. May not be that way next year, but yeah, we'll give it to them for the work they've performed thus far. All right, Mr. Anderson, Rental Program Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Rental Program Committee did meet on October 12th for our third meeting, and thanks to Mr. Braun, we were able to dig in quite a bit on some sample, or not sample, but expected legislation that we've talked about to deal with nuisance properties, to deal with some of the issues we talked about in the last meeting. related, and it would cover also the things that Mr. Jacobs mentioned around hotels and motels. The same nuisance program, in theory, is planned, not in theory, is planned or expected to cover those types of situations too, to give some teeth to some of the building code that might be lacking. So the committee is definitely taking a very broad look at what's going on with the zoning code and some of these, misuses in residential areas and hotels as we go through that. So there was some really good in-depth detailed work that happened at the last meeting, and we hope to have an ordinance at our next meeting on November 9th to review again and make changes, hopefully, to get something back before this body shortly after. There's one other item that was discussed in there that's relevant. There's another community nearby that's dealing with things around zoning and planning that's actually gone to litigation. Milford's been trying to deal with Airbnbs and how they have restricted those. I mention that only because it came up in the meeting, and it's something council might be asked to share their opinions on, is some of the things that they're going to litigate are adjacent or directly would impact the ordinances that we're talking about passing. So we certainly have an opportunity to contribute to that litigation if we so chose, to make sure that what we're doing passes muster when we pass something. And I don't know if Mr. Braun would be able to add more to that, the idea of council or some other body sharing some additional concerns about the legislation. It's certainly something we have the ability to do if we're interested, or we can wait until after the ordinance comes out.
Mr. Braun?
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilmember Anderson's correct. We're monitoring that lawsuit. I think some of the issues that are being raised in that relate directly to the work that's being done on really two levels right now, one for the rental committee and the other with the task that the Board of Health has given us related to some of these hotels. One of the questions is if we feel that we can add value to that litigation or that we want to somehow get involved. I expect other communities to get involved. I'm actually part of a listserv right now with a couple other local governments who are addressing these issues, and we're kind of all talking about the case and what we might be doing. So I'll probably update you once I have a better idea of what, if any, role we can play. But I am watching the case. It's an interesting case, primarily because the case involves some previously elected officials in the city of Milford who own these Airbnbs who are now serving as plaintiffs challenging the ordinance that was passed by a different council in that community. However, it raises novel issues that affect our community. So I'll continue to monitor it. I also today checked again on the status of the legislation that's pending in the Ohio legislature. I think it's House Bill 235, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't bring my file, but it is the legislation that would take away from local governments the ability to pass zoning and or other regulations governing Airbnbs and short-term rentals. That legislation is interesting because it's in the legislature and it's had one reading committee. It's expected to have a second, but may not have a vote before the end of the year, which then would mean the legislation would die. If it does go to a vote, I don't know at this moment if it would pass, but the Municipal League is opposed to that and fighting it. That could also affect both the lawsuit and some of the things that we're doing. So we're watching this on multiple levels. I'll try to keep you advised of significant events that take place both with the legislation and the lawsuit. So.
Thank you. Ms. McNair?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Anderson, was there anything addressed about parking in this upcoming legislation?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We decided that we were splitting our tasks into two major groups. One was around building code, zoning, property maintenance, and the other part, the second set, was about traffic and parking. So the intent is this first group will be building maintenance, property maintenance, zoning, and uses. And then the intent, once we get that ordinance where we like it, we're going to go back and start on traffic and parking type of concerns. So this ordinance does not have those any more than identifying that some of those things could be nuisance complaints if it's illegal parking, like if somebody's parking on their yard consistently and they get cited for that. That type of thing would be covered under the ordinance that we're talking about, declaring a nuisance property, and then there'd be consequences. The intent of this legislation isn't to fix that specifically, but it is included as characteristics of nuisances.
Thank you. There's a lot of issues with rental property. I have a piece of rental property myself. There are a lot of rental properties around it. I can tell you that I'm at my rental property 3 to 4 times a week, and I've not been able to park in front of that house in over 3 weeks. And because there are so many people living in some of those other rental properties, so many families living in those. There are 4, 5, 6 cars per 900 square foot home, which is definitely impacting the neighborhood, and tempers are flaring over the parking situation. When people are parking in front of the houses, they're parking in the grass.
Yeah.
You know, people can't mow their lawns, and they can't, you know, it's killing the grass, so there's a lot of issues that are surrounding that.
Yeah, certainly the illegal parking is addressed or at least accounted for, but we do have those concerns identified, as Mr. Vander might be able to share more on. We intend to cover that in more detail after this initial set, but the illegal stuff would count towards it, so like the parking in the grass and, you know, abandoned vehicles, or if they're in disrepair, those type of citations would be included.
And perhaps this is something that we add to how to be a good neighbor, because some people have driveways, but yet they're still parking on the street, which, you know, other people can't park on the street at that point. Even if they have garages, they're not using them. So there's just a lot of issues when there are 4, 5, 6 cars per home, and they're not using the driveways or their garages, and they are taking up spaces on the street. And in particular, there's one house that's on the corner, but they don't park. They only park on the street. In front of their house, they don't park on the side, which it's legal parking there, but that also means that everybody else has to shift down in front of somebody else's house. So it is an annoyance. Thank you.
Ms. Weisskopf?
Thank you, Mr. President. I was going to say, I missed this last meeting because I had a kidney stone, but the meeting before, we kind of touched on that, and I actually want to tell Jeff's story, if you don't mind. Jeff, he had like 5 cars? I don't want to say it wrong. So just for their immediate family, for him and his brothers, 4 or 5 cars, like in one household, and that was the same way it was at my house as well. We had 5 cars in our household, and we had a single car driveway, and we lived on a cul-de-sac, and you could only park on one side of the street. So by the time that my parents had both parked their cars in the driveway, because we were not allowed to park in the driveway because we're children, we had to park out in the street, and sometimes that meant I was all the way at another street. Parking has always been an issue in Springdale. You know, but if we have anybody who has a family more than what you have space in your driveway for, and I know there's plenty of people who don't use their driveway at all and they only use the street, and that's hard. I don't know that we could force people to have to park in their driveways, but I know that we're going to look at different ideas, and I'm excited. Once that we finish Phase 1, I'm excited to see how that's going to bleed into and work with Phase 2 and get to that, because I know that it is a problem. Back in my neighborhood, we have a very, very narrow street that has the most cars on it in all of the world, and it's so hard to drive through there, and so it is a problem. But like Mr. Anderson said, the number one was addressing the illegal car issue, like in the grass or up on the side, you know, address that stuff first, and then hopefully get more in depth to it and figure out what we could do.
Ms. McNear?
Yes, thank you for that additional information. But I will tell you, too, that I've lived in Springdale since 1969, so I'm very well aware of the parking issues that can occur. But they have gotten considerably worse now that there are so many people living in these tiny little houses that only have a single drive. I have a single drive at my rental property as well. But thank you for that additional info.
Well, and I'll add on to what Mr. Anderson said. Part of our thought process in doing this first phase is parking in the yards falls under building zoning. So, and we're hoping that some of the other caveats that we have in there will have an effect on the on-street. But believe me, my wife will give me dirty looks. You know, it's an ongoing issue. It's not just Heritage Hill, the Terrace. You know, we come in Sunday and at Benedier and Crescentville, and there was a car parked right on the corner, and the stop signs, you know, has the right-of-way through, so you're backing up on Crescentville, waiting for traffic to get obeyed so you can get by to come through. So it's going to be at least a 2-prong, maybe even 3-prong when it's all said and done, but we're hoping that this first wave catches some and, corrects, some of the issues. But we're not done by any long shot, so rest assured. Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll just add one other thing to one part of the comment you made, Ms. McNair, was around that community feel. Like if you can use your driveway, you should, because it's it frees up space for your neighbors. As Mr. Vanover mentioned, like we think improving people's responsibility, setting expectations for what the buildings are maintained and how rental property is maintained, we think that'll have some effect on community spirit and engagement. But I don't think that we're going to be able to legislate that. It's something that I think as we look through other ordinances and as we work through things like the community center and our facilities and these things, how can we give Springdale this, the community engagement, the thinking of your neighbors and those connections? A couple years ago, Ms. Gantos and I started doing, as part of the PR group, how do we re-engage the community and help people make those connections? Well, then COVID hit and that kind of fell by the wayside. But I think some of what you're talking about won't be legislation, but it'll be other programs that City Council might be championing or administration will champion to have people feel engaged with the community. And then that sort of connection happens. I feel like part of the concern you raised about the number of people in some of these houses is just the nature of where we are right now. Housing is so expensive right now. People are having to double up or rent where they in the past would have bought starter homes like what are in the older parts of Springdale. That's just not an option for people anymore. So we're certainly open as part of the committee for ideas on how we can improve parking and traffic because it's tough, and we're not the only ones having that problem. These are small houses, and they were built for single families, the nuclear family with 1 or 2 people, 1 driver, 1 car. Maybe as we add more bike paths, people will need fewer cars. If we make things more accessible, people will need fewer cars. If people are engaged with the community, maybe they'll think more about where I park affects my neighbors. At least that's what we're talking about in the committee. I don't know. But if there's ideas from not just council, but anyone on what we can do for traffic and parking, the committee meets on November 9th at 2 o'clock, or you could send those ideas to any of us and we'll take them up because we're interested.
And also add that with part of this, in the very near future, we probably are going to have to address the building department staffing because we're now multiplying their responsibility, and Mr. Lamping has been very forthright and honest about what the needs are, and we're gonna have to do something, and it doesn't make any sense to put legislation out there if we don't have the manpower and the teeth to enforce it. So I'll give you a little heads up, not to be surprised at some point that this is brought to your attention. All right. Well, with that, we'll go to communications. Ms. McNair, are there any communications this evening?
Thank you, Mr. President. I did receive one piece of communication from the general public, and I have forwarded that to administration for review. Okay. And that concludes the report. Thank you.
All right. And at this point, we'll open the floor for communications from the audience. Anybody like to address council for any reason?
Hello, my name is Katie Wells and I live on Bernhardt Court. I am speaking today on behalf of the Springdale Elementary PTA, where I serve as the secretary. I'm sorry if this is repeated information, maybe for Lawrence, that you've already got. We wanted to invite everyone to the Springdale Elementary Student Council Walkathon. It's taking place on October 28th at 2 p.m. The students will have the opportunity to wear their costumes and fundraise for prizes, such as a special treat at lunch, homework passes, extra recess. Our top 5 students that raise the most money will be given an option of being the principal, gym teacher, or a teacher of their choice for an afternoon, as well as the option to spend lunch and recess with Officer Beckman or be the school chef for the day. So it's really exciting, and they definitely need your help. Whoever is the lucky top winner will get picked up by Officer Beckman and driven to school. And the class that raises the most money will win a VIP police demonstration and cruiser tour. So they really need your help if you know anyone who goes to Springdale Elementary. I'm pretty sure the majority wants to be the principal, but who knows? We are going to be helping Student Council have these funds raised so that they can improve their playground. Right now, we have a Gaga ball pit that the Boy Scouts helped build, but they didn't think ahead about the dirt. So when it rains, it's a mud pit, and then they can't use it, and then it just sits there for eternity. And the kids love Gaga ball. I don't know what it is. I'm sorry, I can't answer any of that. But they love it, and then they come home really dirty because they still want to go out there and play. So they're raising money to fix the playground and address some of those needs. The students will be walking in Springdale Terrace and Royal Oaks neighborhoods behind the school. So we would love to have the city and residents support by having people come out and cheer them on as they walk around in their costumes. We'd also like to invite everyone to support the Springdale Elementary teachers, staff, and students by becoming a member of the PTA. Membership's open to anyone interested in the welfare of children, not just parents, but staff, grandparents, aunts and uncles, neighbors, community businesses, students, elected officials, etc. Membership dues are only $10, and you can join at any time. Research shows that children will perform better when the adults and people in their area are involved both home and at school. So by becoming a member of the PTA, you'll be demonstrating the importance you place on our children's education, and will also be a part of the solution by helping us make positive changes. We currently have La Rosa's buddy cards available if anyone wants to buy one of those for $10, and we can send them home with a student you're family with, or we can literally mail it right to your house, so you don't have to do anything. I brought a handout if anybody would like one tonight, and I'd be more than happy to answer any additional questions you have at any time. You can email us at princeton.springdalepta@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook under Springdale Elementary PTA, also on Twitter at Springdale_PTA, and our website is springdaleelementary.ptboard.com. And that's all I have.
Ms. Weisskopf?
I just wanted to know, what are the different ways that we can donate? Like, do we write a check? Is there a website that we need to
Yep,
go to?
if
How does
you-
this work?
Yep, the PT board website. So you can go there. I also have some printouts. So if you are like, hey, I want to help with that.
Of course.
Anybody who's like, hey, I want to give $10 and be a member, and I can help, whether that's help a student raise some more funds. You can let us know if you want it to be directly a donation for something specific, or it can just be a general donation. You can find that on the PT board website, springdaleelementary.ptboard.com. You can reach out to us in any way too. We'll help you walk through it. And then the printouts I have QR codes, so you can literally just scan and.
Is that is the QR code for becoming a member or for
Yes,
the walkathon? Okay,
but you can do a donation there too.
Okay, that's what I was
Either
wondering,
or.
because you could do the walkathon at the same place that you become a member.
But if you know someone who goes to school, definitely make sure you do it for them, or they'll be really mad at you.
So you're saying Tegan's gonna get mad if we don't? Okay.
Because they want to, ride with Officer Beckman or become
Absolutely.
principal for the day. So
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the information.
yeah.
All right, floor's still open.
Do I need to write this down here? Do I fill this out?
Yes, please.
Okay, so, well, I'll talk first. So, I'm on the Springdale Community Facebook group, and the person who sent in the audience communication letter, or the letter to Ms. McNeary, is wondering why his letter won't be read today, because it does push it back another 2 weeks, which is a month from what the issue that he wanted to address was. So I thought since he's not here today, he's watching from home, I thought I'd come up and ask if you could explain why it needed to go through administration first.
Mr. Braun?
Thank you.
There's not a council rule that requires communications from residents to be read at a council meeting, and it's our understanding that the communication that came in asked a series of questions for staff and administration, and I think the intent is that administration will answer those just as they do other community questions, and then provide those directly to the resident.
So you're saying he won't have to wait another 2 weeks to get his responses?
I would assume that we can answer it long before 2 weeks, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Second call. All right, third and final call. We'll close communications from the audience. At this point, we'll move into ordinances and resolutions. First off this evening is ordinance number 31, 2022. It does have a public hearing attached. Ms. McNear, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 31, 2022, an ordinance approving a zoning map amendment for the property located at 111 Tri-County Parkway and approving the preliminary development plan and the final development plan for the property. Whereas on September 13th, 2022, the Planning Commission met and considered a zoning change for the real property located at 111 Tri-County Parkway involving a total of 3.456 acres, the property, for a proposed amendment to the zoning map of the City of Springdale, the application. And whereas the application sought to rezone the property from General Business District GB to Planned Unit Development PUD, allow for the construction of a Hamilton County EMA communications facility. And whereas provided for in section 153.255G of the Springdale Code of Ordinances, the applicant combined the application with the preliminary development plan and the final development plan associated with the property. And whereas the City of Springdale Planning Commission in considering the application recommended approval of the zoning change for the property from General Business District GB to Planned Unit Development PUD and recommended approval of the preliminary development plan and the final development plan. And whereas on October to be determined 2022, after proper notice having been given, Council of the City of Springdale held a public hearing to consider the proposed change in zoning from General Business District GB to Planned Unit Development PUD and the proposed development plan. And whereas upon conclusion of the public hearing, the Council of the City of Springdale considered in an open meeting the proposed amendment to the City of Springdale zoning map and recommendation of the Planning Commission to change the zoning of 111 Tri-County Parkway from General Business District GB to Planned Unit Development PUD and the proposed development plan. Now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, the recommendation of the City of Springdale Planning Commission with regard to 111 Tri-County Parkway is hereby approved, and the amendment to the City of Springdale zoning map is granted such that zoning for 111 Tri-County Parkway is hereby changed from General Business District GB to Planned Unit Development PUD. Section 2, the request to approve the preliminary development plan and the final development plan for the property located at 111 Tri-County Parkway, which have been listed and described in Exhibit A, which is incorporated herein by reference, is hereby approved, subject to the conditions of the Planning Commission and any other conditions or modifications imposed by council, including A, a special buffer yard shall apply, and B, the dumpster gate shall remain closed at all times, and C, generators shall be tested or test operated between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and D, all building elevations exterior color palette per samples submitted in the drawings. E, a deviation from the code section 153.2543C to alleviate the required screening of the tower, and F, the sidewalk along the north side of the property shall be required at 5 feet in width, thus the alternative sidewalk plan is not accepted, and G, all equipment shall be contained within the maintenance storage building. Section 3, the council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 4, this ordinance shall take effect on the earliest date allowed by law.
All right, at this point, I'll open a public hearing for anybody that likes to speak either for or against. And Mr. Lamping, I see you've got a presentation for us.
No, sir, thank you, Mr. President. No, sir, I would like just to generally overview the project graphically. This
Sure.
is the information that the Planning Commission received, reviewed, and considered. 111 Tri-County Parkway is the existing building is here. It's a two-story building, and essentially the Hamilton County commissioners bought the building and they wanted to move the EMA and the 911 call center into the building. So to accommodate that use, that new use, they would like to put up a fence around the parking lot, and the fence, the security fence, is going to be back here. So the front parking is for public and the back parking is for staff. And so they're separating that. And then they, in addition to this existing two-story building, they're going to add a couple other buildings here. One is for generators and the other one is for a storm shelter. So when there's a storm, a tornado or whatever, they have the option to go into a secured storm shelter. Also with this presentation, I have a simple layout of the
inside of the building. On the first floor is where they're gonna have the EMA facility. Might have just misspoke. Nope. And then on the second floor, this is where they're gonna have the 911 facility. So if there's any questions, I can try to answer them. I don't see anyone here from the developer, so I don't know if there's gonna be any presentation from them.
All right, Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. President. I know that security is something that they're concerned about. Can you describe the fencing?
Yes, sir. We have, I think, some good elevations of the building, and it'll show the fencing as well. This is the north, looking from Tri-County. You'll have the curved face here. The fencing starts at the building and goes to the east. So it's going to be tall, black, I believe aluminum fencing. There'll be a better detail here in a second. This is a section. This is the Merchant Place, which is now, it was office building, now it's an apartment building. This is their building. This is the Shakely building up on the hill, and this is the new tower that they're going to install, to give you a relative height comparison. And then this is a nice elevation of it. The fencing is back here behind the front doors. So you'll pull in and the public will stay. There's the fencing right there, if you can see it. And then there's a better picture of the fencing. This is on the secured side, and the other side's the public side. So this is actually one of the nicer projects we received some good renderings from. There's actually pictures of it, and the gate they plan to have.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I had a question last time on the first reading about Section 2, B, and C. Did we get those questions addressed? The first one was about dumpsters shall remain closed at all times, and the second one was generators shall be tested. Do that language need to be updated to let them use their dumpsters, and also that they may test between those times as opposed to must? Or am I misreading shall on both of those?
Mr. Braun?
I know Mr. Lamping's here as well. I just wanted you to know I did reach out to Mr. Lamping prior to tonight's council meeting, and he indicated to me that that is the standard language they use for dumpster requirements, that they shall remain closed, and that his office knows how to enforce those without needing to change that language. That is also the language that came from Planning Commission, so he preferred to keep it that way with the understanding that they know how to enforce it. I did not ask you about the generators, if you want to address that issue, but I'm assuming that that time was specified by Planning Commission.
The time was specified by Planning Commission, as the council people on the committee can attest to. It was something that the commission was concerned about, operating those generators near the residential uses at odd hours or at night and things like that. So it was shall versus should, or whatever.
May.
May, yes, sir.
Allowed versus must, I guess, but if that's that's what I wanted to make sure, is the language is consistent, and it's.
The language that was in the motion is what the commission motioned.
Okay.
It was their motion. I didn't ad-lib it.
And we heard that last time, but
Yes.
the new information was that, and that's the language the building department uses successfully to get the type of behavior we're
That's the
looking for.
language the planning commission consistently uses on all motions when they have the issue of the trash enclosures. And we, like Mr. Braun indicated, we know how to enforce that.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Second call for public hearing? Third and final call? All right, we'll close the public hearing. Council, this is the second reading of ordinance 31, 2022, and can be enacted upon this evening. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion second. Discussion? All right, seeing no lights, Ms. McNear, you poll council.
Mrs. Sullivan Weiscup.
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins.
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
Mrs. Gantos. Mr. Jacobs.
Aye.
Mr. Ramirez.
Aye.
Mr. Vanover.
Aye. Ordinance 31, 2022 passes with 7 affirmative votes. And next up, ordinance number 32, 2022. This also has a public hearing attached. So, Ms. McNair, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 32, 2022, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and clerk of council, finance director to enter into an agreement with Pruis Construction for the East Kemper Road CSX Bridge Rehabilitation Project and declaring an emergency. Whereas the 2022 bridge budget included funding in the amount of $902,341 for the East Kemper Road CSX Bridge Rehabilitation Project, and whereas the city of Springdale, the city, advertised for bids for the East Kemper Road CSX Bridge Rehabilitation Project, and whereas sealed bids were opened on September 22nd, 2022, and whereas the city has reviewed the bids and determined that the lowest and best bid was submitted by Pruis Construction in the amount of $1,199,678.50. And whereas the work to be performed is being partially funded with the award of $451,171 that the city received from the Ohio Public Works Commission, OPWC, State Capital Improvement Program, SCIP, Round 35. And whereas if the project were to be rebid for exceeding the engineer's estimate, it would risk the city losing the award of the funds from the state of Ohio being used to fund the project that is subject of the bid. Therefore, the city seeks to use its home rule authority and declare an emergency in order to move forward and award the bid. Now therefore, be it ordained by the council of the city of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, the City of Springdale City Council finds that the bid submitted by Pruis Construction in the amount of $1,199,678.50 to be the lowest and best bid submitted for the East Kemper Road CSX Bridge Rehabilitation Project. Section 2, under its home rule authority and the city charter, City Council authorizes the mayor and the clerk of council, finance director to enter into an agreement with Pruis Construction for the East Kemper Road CSX Bridge Rehabilitation Project in the amount of $1,199,678.50. The agreement. A copy of the agreement is attached as Exhibit A and incorporated herein by reference. Section 3, council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 4, this ordinance shall take effect on the earliest date allowed by law. Section 5, that this ordinance shall be an emergency measure necessary for the preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and general welfare, and shall, subject to the terms of Article 2D, 3D of the Charter, be effective immediately. The reason for the declaration of emergency is the need to award the bid to the bidder and move forward with the project to avoid losing funds that have been awarded by the state of Ohio to fund a significant portion of the project.
All right, with that, we'll open a public hearing. They'll open the floor for either for or against. Mr. Riggs, do you have anything else you wanted to add to this other than what you stated in your report?
No, I do not.
Okay. All right, second call. Third and final call, we'll close the public hearing. Council, this is a second reading, and it does include an emergency clause and can be acted upon this evening. What is your pleasure? Motion second, discussion. Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Riggs, could you give us some idea why, or what are your thoughts on for why a 30% overestimate was? I mean, I know materials, inflation, and labor. In the past, when we've had jobs like this, it's timing with the contractors. In this case, we had one person bid, and it was 30% higher. Can you share a little bit more on why you think that was such a miss?
We did reach out to Bruce, and he did indicate that obviously the inflation and labor shortage and material shortage, that did come into play. But one of the biggest things, well, two things, was working with the railroad. Bruce has a construction contract currently underway, and based on his experience with that flagger for CSX, it's the same rail line. I think this line is 28 trains a day. And depending on the flagger they have from CSX, it could be shut down for the whole day, it could be shut down for the hour, depending, 28 trains a day means almost a train about every hour. So depending on the flagger, there's a lot of downtime. So that led to a lot of higher costs because he accounted for that lost production and the unit cost. Then also he indicated that the maintenance of traffic, it was originally set up in 5 phases. So basically, you would close 2 lanes at a time. Because there's so many change in phases and such limited times the contractor is able to work, that also stretched things out and made it more costly. We've been doing some talking internally, and we may have a value engineering approach to the maintenance of traffic. We're working with our city engineer or traffic engineer to evaluate if we can maybe reduce it from 5 to 3 lanes. That would require 4 lanes to be shut down at a time instead of 2. So that does restrict traffic, but it may be something that we're willing to live with, at least during the short term, because construction generally, if say it starts next month, it's estimated to take about 8 months to complete, and the contractor did confirm that that's a reasonable time frame. So it may just be better just to sort of rip the Band-Aid off, so to speak, and do it in a tighter, maintenance of traffic scheme than what was originally proposed. But those are the 2, I would say, biggest items. There's a few other items that we could look at value engineering. We did propose to use wet reflective pavement marking. So that's basically a newer type pavement reflective marking that it's brighter at night when it's wet. It has more, like a different glass bead or more glass beads. So apparently that's really expensive. So that's why some of the paint costs are high. But we don't have to use that. We can maybe entertain an idea of a change order and just going back to normal thermoplastic markings, which is elsewhere in the city. Same way with raised pavement markers. Instead of actually the pavement markers being raised, we had in our bid to be recessed. Well, again, that was something we were trying to do on this project, but we can put them back in normal. Recessing them, because you have to grind out where the pavement markers go down, that adds quite a bit of cost.
Well, I don't think we're trying to redesign it on the fly here if we need to act quickly to make a change. I guess my bigger concern was, is this a canary in a coal mine for other projects we have planned in the short term, or is this unique enough because of the railroad, as you're describing, that maybe we just need to be more careful in future railroad-partnered projects and have more room?
Definitely. Rebidding it wouldn't help. We only got one bidder, and the costs were reflective of his knowledge and experience with that. That's definitely going to be something we'll have to keep in mind when we're doing the next railroad project, if and when everyone does come up. But a lot of the funding issues, a lot of the grant applications and funding applications, that was all pre-COVID estimates. That's what the funding was based off, and now here we are dealing with 30 to 40%. This is, regionally at least that's the kind of cost inflation we're seeing on construction projects. So
that's helpful. I certainly don't want to lose the matching funds. This work has to get done. I just didn't know if we need to look back at other projects coming up and rethink them a little bit more.
We're for example, Northland, we're continuing to evaluate cost on that. And with Northland, because it was delayed a year, it provided us a little more opportunity to hone in and on the cost and look at other funding opportunities, say SORTA and, the county. And that way, when we go request funding from them, we'll be using current numbers instead of the ones we did 3 years ago.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. President. And I just wanted, either from Mr. Riggs or the administration, I wanted to clarify and make sure that the public knew. We got 3 different grants through the course of this. We got the municipal road funds, $145,000. We got from Hamilton County, $150,000, and then the SCIP funds, $451,000. So all that comes out to about $746,601. That's accurate.
We also have SORTA funds from round 1.
Okay.
And I think that was 110. Is that right? Something around there. Jeff can speak to the funding. But I will say, as far as the SORTA, the funding cutoff date, we did request an extension for the OPWC funds already. That gave us, and we told them, because it was supposed to be under construction by July 1st, according to the agreement. They worked with us because we were delaying the project because we were waiting for the bid environment to calm down. Well, we didn't wait long enough, apparently. But they did allow that one-time extension, so we feel that if we won't get another extension, they'll just move on.
Specifically, with regards to our local share for this project, with the current bid price, our share of this construction cost is 16%. So with the funding, we have 12% from municipal road funds, we have 38% from the OPWC, we have 9% from SORTA, and the county engineer has 25% in the project. That leaves us at 16.
And I know we applied for these at different points in time.
Yes.
Did we get any of the grants or find out we got any of these grants after December of 2021?
The SORTA we received most recently, and that was in their round one, that was for their fiscal year 22. So that,
Okay.
that would have been after that period.
Okay. And I'm just looking at from when we had put a budget in for $902,000. And so the main thing is, while we had some increase, we did have a lot of grants coming in for us, and even some grants even after we had made the budget that maybe wasn't fully expected coming through to help us out.
And I will say that the SORTA grant application, we actually requested more money, but because it had some, what they call construction soft cost, it was deemed not eligible. I think it was
I
maybe.
think we actually requested 150.
Yeah.
And we were brought down to 110 was the final SORTA grant award.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, I don't see any more lights. Ms. McNear, full council.
Mrs. Gantos? Aye. Mrs. Sullivan Weiscup?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Ramirez?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye. Ordinance 32, 2022 passes with 7 affirmative votes. And next up is ordinance 33, 2022. This is a first reading. Ms. McNear, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 33, 2022, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and clerk of council, finance director to enter into an agreement with the Board of County Commissioners, Hamilton County, Ohio, for the fire hydrant repair and replacement services. Whereas the city of Springdale, the city has fire hydrants within the city in need of repair and or replacement at various times throughout the year. And whereas Hamilton County Planning and Development Field Operations has submitted a proposal to the city to provide services for the repair and or replacement of fire hydrants within the city. And whereas the city seeks to enter into an agreement with the Board of County Commissioners, Hamilton County, Ohio, for fire hydrant repair and replacement services. Now therefore be it ordained by the council of the city of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, Council of the City of Springdale. Council agrees to authorize the mayor and clerk of council, finance director, to enter into agreement with the Board of County Commissioners, Hamilton County, Ohio, for fire hydrant repair and replacement services. A copy of the agreement is attached at Exhibit A and incorporated herein by reference. Excuse me. Section 2, council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 3, this ordinance shall take effect at the earliest period allowed by law.
All right, council, this is a first reading. We will see it again. Is there any discussion this evening? All right. Well, with that, we complete our ordinances and resolutions. At this point, we'll go to old business. Is there any old business to bring before council this evening? New business. Ms. McNear?
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, you received a liquor license request from Crafty Crab at 11790 Springfield Pike. This is a D1 license request. Is there any issues with that? A D1 is beer only for on-premise consumption or in original sealed containers for carry-out only until 1 a.m.
Ms. Weisskopf?
I don't have any problem with that. I just had a question because I noticed that the date on it was 1/7/2020. Is that when they first put this in, or is that, how does that work? I don't know.
Actually, I have 2 of them with 2 different dates on them, so,
Okay.
for the same place. So I don't know if there's a reason for the delay. They couldn't get it, or they put it on hold because of the
COVID.
because of the pandemic.
I know that during the pandemic, they didn't have eat in, they only had pickup, so that may, maybe.
Which is probably why they delayed it. And I believe they have another liquor license too, and this is just a different variety of which allows them to actually do the D1.
Thank you so much for your
Quite welcome.
clarification.
So I'm assuming no objections? If not, we'll take care of the paperwork. Secondly, I received another one this evening, which is why you don't have a copy of it. This one is a transfer, same property, but it's SKJ Properties, LLC, doing business as Route 747 Sunoco Truck Stop at 12089 Princeton Pike. As I mentioned, it's the same address. It's J. Jala Incorporated, same address. And this, again, is a transfer for C1, C2. C1 is beer only and original sealed containers for carryout only. C2, wine and mixed beverages and sealed containers for carryout. Really not much change other than the name, assuming there's no issue if we go ahead and sign off on this one as well. All right, we'll take care of filing the paperwork. Thank you so much.
All right. Still new business? All right, meetings and announcements. Ms. Weisskopf.
Thank you, Mr. President. Planning Commission will meet in these chambers on Tuesday, November 15th at 7 p.m.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Rental Program Committee will meet on November 9th at 2 p.m. in the Administrative Conference Room.
Mr. Yule.
Thank you, Mr. President. Civil Service will meet on Thursday, November 3rd at 2 p.m. in the Council Conference Room.
Mr. Jacobs.
Board of Health meet November 10th, adjacent to these chambers.
Okay. And find it here, I would be remiss. The Creek Walk, or cleanup, Mill Creek, got it here someplace. It's the 29th, here we go. October 29th, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. There is an RSVP with a QR code to do that. They are meeting at the at Chamberlain Park. Is that there on the backside or the by the mulch pit or?
It will be by the
compost pile. Okay. All right. If any of you haven't done or been in the creek for a while, it is well, it's been 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we did that big project over there. That's
2012.
Been 12, okay.
It's been a while.
10 years.
Yeah, there's actually a creek component as well as a land component to this cleanup. And through the RSV process with the Mill Creek Alliance, you can choose your preference. Those that don't want to go in the creek or aren't, comfortable with that, they can do a lot of good on land with clearing of invasives and so forth. So.
All right. Okay. Don't see any more lights for meetings and announcements, so at this point, we'll open the floor for communications from the audience. Is there anybody in the audience like to address council for any reason? Second call? Third and final call, we'll close communications from the audience. Mr. Hawkins, we'll go to you for an update on legislation still in development.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you review your internal memorandum, item number 1 was addressed with ordinance number 31, 2022, an ordinance approving a zoning map amendment for the property located at 111 Tri-County Parkway and approving the preliminary development plan and the final development plan of the property, which passed the 7-0 vote. Item number 2 was addressed with ordinance number 32, 2022, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and clerk of council finance director to enter into an agreement with the best contractor for the East Kemper Road CSX Bridge Rehabilitation Project and declaring an emergency, and that passed the 7-0 vote. Item number 3 was addressed with ordinance number 33, 2022, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and clerk of council finance director to enter into an agreement with the Board of County Commissioners for Hamilton County, Ohio for fire hydrant repair and replacement services, and that was a first reading. All other matters were forthcoming.
All right, and staying with Mr. Hawkins, an update on legislation items requested for the next council meeting.
There's a request for a second reading, ordinance number 33, 2022, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and clerk of council finance director to enter into an agreement with the Board of County Commissioners for Hamilton County, Ohio, for fire hydrant repair and replacement services. There's also a request for a resolution approving the update to the Hamilton County Solid Waste District Management, as well as a request for a resolution regarding the CED. I think that's it, unless there's anything else from council or the administration.
Administration, we good? Okay. Well, just to backtrack on something, we were talking about dealing with the railroad. The Ohio State Supreme Court ruled, and it's been about a month ago now, that we can't interfere or act upon the railroad, so they can block the crossing for as long as the cows come in, I guess. So that is essentially, you know, what you're dealing with that group. Unfortunately, the laws were written by railroad lawyers, and we're still dealing with those. I know years past we've gone to bat and battle with them and lost a couple times around. So it is frustrating, and they are operating from an uphill position. So it is definitely aggravating, and they come right through. So luckily we got one crossing taken care of, but we still have one that continues to be a problem. And with that, we have item 16 before us.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Council's adjourned.